Martha sat by her kitchen window, a steaming mug of tea warming her hands. Outside, the leaves on the old oak tree were just starting to turn golden, a gentle reminder that another year had passed. It had been a whole year since her dear husband, George, had left her. The silence in the house, once filled with his humming and the clatter from his workshop, still felt too big, too empty. She missed George every single day. She missed the way he'd tell her funny stories about his day, even the silly ones about the squirrels in the backyard. She missed his strong, warm hugs and the way he always knew how to make her laugh, even when she felt sad. George had been her rock, her best friend, for over 50 wonderful years. Now, at 78, Martha found herself navigating life alone, a path she never imagined walking. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss a new video. And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I love seeing all different people come together for these stories. Her children, Sarah and Tom, called often, checking in and making sure she wasn't too lonely. They lived in other towns, busy with their own families and jobs. But their love was a comforting blanket. Still, there were quiet moments, like this morning, when the weight of her loneliness settled heavy in her chest. She'd sigh, remembering some small thing George used to do, like leaving her a fresh flower on her bedside table or making her favorite toast for breakfast. The house, their home for decades, felt different without him. Every room held a memory, a story of their life together. His favorite armchair sat empty in the living room, a book still resting on the side table just where he'd left it. His gardening gloves still hung by the back door, waiting for hands that would never wear them again. And then there was his workshop, a place Martha hadn't dared to enter since the funeral. It was a space full of George's spirit, his projects, his tools, and a quiet sadness that Martha hadn't been brave enough to face. But today, as the autumn light streamed through the window, a small spark of determination flickered within her. Maybe, just maybe, it was time. The small spark of determination grew into a steady flame. Martha pushed herself up from the kitchen table, leaving her half-finished tea. She walked slowly toward the back of the house, where a sturdy wooden door, painted a cheerful blue by George years ago, led to his workshop. Her heart thumped a little faster with each step. This was it. She paused at the threshold, her hand hovering over the doorknob. A faint smell of sawdust and old wood, a smell so distinctly George, drifted from beneath the door. It was a smell that used to bring her comfort, a sign that he was happily tinkering away, lost in one of his many projects. Now, it brought a pang of bittersweet memory. Taking a deep breath, Martha turned the knob and pushed the door open. The workshop was just as George had left it. Tools hung neatly on pegboards, each one in its place. A half-finished birdhouse sat on his workbench, a testament to a project he never got to complete. Shelves lined the walls, filled with jars of screws, nails, bits of wood, and various other treasures George had collected over the years. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight that pierced the grimy window panes. Martha stepped inside, her eyes scanning the familiar space. This was his sanctuary, his happy place. He spent countless hours here, creating things with his hands, fixing broken items, or simply thinking. For a whole year, she hadn't been able to bring herself to disturb it. The thought of sorting through his things, of truly letting go, had been too painful. But today felt different. She knew George wouldn't want his beloved workshop to sit unused and forgotten. He'd want it to be tidy, ready for a new purpose, even if that purpose was just a clean slate. She walked over to the workbench, running her fingers over the smooth, worn wood. "All right, George," she whispered, a small smile touching her lips. "Let's get this place organized." She knew it wouldn't be easy, and it would surely bring more tears, but she felt a strange sense of peace settling over her. This wasn't just cleaning. It was a way of honoring him, of spending time in a place he loved, and perhaps of finding a little bit of him still there. Stepping further into the workshop, Martha took in the full scope of George's organized chaos. Tools, though neatly hung, were covered in a fine layer of dust. The workbench, aside from the birdhouse, was scattered with wood shavings, pencil marks, and tiny pieces of hardware. Stacked against one wall were various planks of wood, some long and smooth, others rough and short, waiting for a purpose. In a corner, a pile of old newspapers and rags created a soft mound. Martha felt a small gasp escape her lips. It was more than she remembered, or perhaps more than she had allowed herself to see from the doorway. George had been a meticulous man in many ways, but his workshop was his own little world, where things were put away in a way that only he understood. To Martha, it looked like a mountain of tasks, each one potentially bringing a wave of emotion. For a moment, she felt a familiar pang of being overwhelmed. Where would she even begin? Each item seemed to hold a story, a memory of George's hands at work. This chisel, that saw, the small magnifying glass he used for tiny details, they all spoke of him. Her initial determination wavered slightly, replaced by a weary sigh. It would be so easy to just close the door again and walk away, to leave it as a dusty shrine. But then, her gaze fell upon a faded photograph tacked to a corkboard above the workbench. It was a picture of her and George, much younger, smiling brightly on a fishing trip. His arm was around her, and his eyes, even in the old photo, sparkled with joy. Seeing his happy face, Martha felt a renewed surge of purpose. George wouldn't want her to give up. He'd tell her to tackle it one piece at a time, just like he did with his projects. "Okay, George," she murmured, her voice a little stronger this time. "One thing at a time." She fetched a dust rag and a small bucket of soapy water from the laundry room. She wouldn't clear everything out, not yet. But she could start by cleaning, by wiping away the dust that had settled since he was last here. It was a small step, but it was a start. The workshop might be a mess, but Martha was determined to bring some order to it, for George and for herself. Martha spent the better part of the morning wiping down surfaces, sorting small piles of nuts and bolts, and sweeping the sawdust into neat piles. It was slow work, but surprisingly peaceful. Each item she touched brought a small memory, a quiet smile to her lips. She felt closer to George in this space than she had in months. After clearing the workbench, she turned her attention to the tall wooden shelves that lined one wall. They were crammed with old paint cans, jars of screws, and various other bits and bobs George had collected over the years. Martha knew George never threw anything away if it could be useful later. She pulled out a few empty cans, dusting them off before setting them aside for the trash. Reaching for a particularly high shelf, Martha stretched her arm. Her fingers brushed against something hard and rectangular, hidden behind a stack of old gardening magazines. She had to stand on her tiptoes, straining a little to get a better grip. With a gentle tug, she managed to slide it forward. It was an old wooden box, about the size of a shoebox, but much thicker and made of dark, heavy wood. It was completely covered in a thick layer of dust, almost as if it had been sitting there, undisturbed for decades. There were no carvings, no labels, no marks of any kind on its plain surface. It looked forgotten, an anonymous relic tucked away in the shadows. Martha carefully lowered the box. As it settled into her hands, she was surprised by its weight. It felt incredibly heavy, much heavier than she expected for its size and plain appearance. She frowned, tilting it this way and that. What could be inside? George had always been open about his projects and collections, never keeping secrets, especially not from her. Yet, she had never seen this box before. It felt foreign, a puzzle. Curiosity now mixed with her quiet sadness. This wasn't just another tool or scrap of wood. This was something different, something hidden. The old box sat in her hands, a silent question waiting to be answered. Martha carried the heavy wooden box over to George's workbench, setting it down with a soft thud. She brushed away some of the thick dust, revealing the dark, aged wood beneath. Her fingers traced the edges, searching for a latch or a hinge. There on the front was a small metal clasp, green with age and a bit stiff. It was clearly meant to keep the box shut tight. She tried to slide the latch open with her thumb, but it wouldn't budge. It felt stuck, perhaps rusted after sitting for so long in the dampness of the workshop. Martha tried again, putting a little more force into it, but it resisted. She didn't want to break it, not before she knew what secrets it held. "Stubborn old thing," she mumbled, a faint smile playing on her lips. It was just like George to have something a little tricky to open, a puzzle to solve. She looked around the workbench, knowing George always had the right tool for every job. Her eyes landed on a row of screwdrivers hanging neatly on the pegboard. She picked out a medium-sized flathead, its handle worn smooth from years of use by George's hands. Carefully, Martha inserted the tip of the screwdriver under the edge of the rusty latch. She wiggled it gently, trying to coax it open without damaging the wood. With a soft creak and a tiny pop, the latch finally gave way. It sprung open slightly, a cloud of dust puffing out from around it. Martha's heart gave a little jump. Now, with the latch unfastened, she reached for the lid. It was heavy, like the rest of the box, and lifted slowly, making a soft groaning sound. As the lid opened, Martha peered inside, her breath held tight. What could George have hidden away so carefully? Her mind raced, imagining old letters, forgotten photos, or maybe even some of his prized fishing lures. The workshop's dim light made it hard to see clearly into the depths of the box, adding to the mystery. Martha carefully lifted the heavy lid of the wooden box, a soft groan echoing in the quiet workshop. She leaned forward, squinting into the dim interior. Her mind was ready for anything. Old wrenches, a stack of love letters, maybe even some sentimental trinkets from George's youth. But what she saw was none of those things. The box was not filled with tools or typical keepsakes. Instead, the top layer was a thick stack of old newspapers, yellowed and brittle with age. They weren't just random papers. They looked like carefully folded clippings, layered one on top of the other, filling the space almost to the brim. Martha gently lifted one corner. The date on the paper was from many years ago, far back in their past. Beneath the newspaper clippings, nestled deep within the box, was a heavy, lumpy cloth bag. It was made of thick, dark canvas, tied shut with a sturdy string. The bag had a significant weight to it, explaining why the whole box had felt so surprisingly heavy. It wasn't a soft, pliable weight, but a solid, almost metallic one. Martha carefully removed the layers of old newspaper. They crumbled slightly at her touch, smelling faintly of dust and time. As she placed them on the workbench, she noticed they weren't just any news clippings. They seemed to be articles about historical events, old market reports, and stories about valuable collections. George had always loved history, but Martha never knew he collected articles like this. Finally, only the cloth bag remained in the box. It sat there, mysterious and heavy, promising something more. Her heart began to beat a little faster. What could George have put inside this secret bag, hidden away for so long? It was clearly important, given the care he took to conceal it and the weight it carried. Martha reached in, her fingers trembling slightly, and lifted the heavy canvas bag from its wooden resting place. The suspense was almost too much to bear. With trembling hands, Martha untied the sturdy string that held the canvas bag shut. The knot was tight, clearly meant to keep its contents secure. As the string loosened, she carefully peeled back the thick cloth. Her eyes, still adjusting to the dim light of the workshop, widened instantly. Inside the bag, nestled together like shining pebbles, were dozens of coins. They weren't the dull, familiar coins you'd find in a purse. These were bright, shimmering gold, catching the light in a dazzling way. Each one was perfectly round, with intricate designs carved into its surface. Martha had never seen anything quite like them. They felt cool and heavy in her palm as she gently scooped a few out. She gasped, a soft, breathless sound that broke the quiet. "Gold?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. They looked like something from an old pirate movie or a treasure chest. One side of a coin showed a regal-looking face, perhaps an old king or queen, with tiny letters carved around the edge. The other side had an eagle with its wings spread wide. Martha carefully poured the rest of the coins onto the clean surface of the workbench. They tumbled out with a soft clinking sound, forming a glittering pile. There were so many of them, easily over 100, each one a small disk of pure, shining gold. They gleamed under the dusty light, a beacon of unexpected brilliance in the otherwise ordinary workshop. She picked up another coin, turning it over and over in her fingers. It felt real, undeniably heavy and precious. She knew enough about jewelry to recognize the unmistakable luster of real gold. But where on earth did George get these? And why had he kept them such a secret, tucked away in a forgotten box on a high shelf? This wasn't just a collection. It felt like a discovery, a secret unearthed after years of slumber. Martha's mind reeled, trying to make sense of the sparkling fortune now spread before her. Martha stared at the glittering pile of gold coins, her mind struggling to grasp what she was seeing. For a moment, a silly thought crossed her mind. Maybe they were just fancy, old-fashioned tokens, like the ones you'd get at a fair, only made to look like gold. George had a playful side. Perhaps this was some elaborate joke. But the weight, the intricate details, and the sheer number of them argued against it. These felt too real, too significant. As she picked up another coin, her fingers brushed against something small and folded, tucked neatly underneath the pile. It was a tiny piece of paper, no bigger than her thumb, worn soft from time. Her heart gave another flutter. This felt important. She carefully unfolded the paper. On it, written in George's familiar, slightly shaky handwriting, were just 5 words. "For our future, my love." Martha felt tears prick her eyes. It was undeniably George's hand. That short, simple message brought a wave of emotions she hadn't expected. It wasn't a joke. It was a secret, a gift, a promise. This wasn't just a collection of pretty trinkets. This was something George had carefully saved, perhaps for years, with her in mind. The words, "our future," echoed in her heart. He had thought of her, thought of them, even in this hidden treasure. It wasn't a future they would share together now, not in the way they had planned, but it was still a future he had provided for. The coins, which moments ago were just shiny objects, now held a deeper meaning, imbued with George's love and foresight. She held the tiny note tightly in her hand, the gold coins shimmering beside it. George, her quiet, dependable George, had been keeping this secret for so long. It was a profound and touching surprise, making her miss him all the more, but also filling her with a strange, warm feeling of being cared for, even from beyond. The mystery of the coins was starting to unravel, revealing not just a hidden fortune, but a hidden act of love. Holding George's tiny note, Martha looked at the shimmering pile of gold coins with new eyes. Her mind drifted back through the years, trying to recall any hint, any small clue George might have given about this secret. George had always been a man of quiet hobbies. He loved to tinker in his workshop, fixing things, building small wooden models, and occasionally bringing home what he called old things. She remembered him coming home from yard sales or antique shops with strange-looking tools, old books with worn covers, or sometimes just interesting pieces of metal or wood. "You never know when these old things might come in handy, Martha," he'd always say with a wink. She'd smile, indulging his harmless collecting, never really paying much attention to the specifics. He was just George, with his love for all things old and interesting. But coins? Gold coins? This was entirely new. She knew he had a small collection of everyday coins, the kind people put in jars for loose change. But nothing like these. These were clearly special, historical, and far too precious to be tossed into a jar. He had never mentioned anything about coin collecting as a serious hobby, let alone acquiring such valuable pieces. It was a side of George she simply didn't know existed. Martha picked up one of the yellowed newspaper clippings she had removed from the box. It was an article from 1972 about a rare coin auction. Another one spoke of the rising value of certain historical artifacts. She realized now that George hadn't just been collecting old things without a purpose. He had been researching, learning, and quietly building this specific treasure. It made sense in a way. George was always patient, always thinking ahead. He wouldn't have just stumbled upon a fortune like this. He must have slowly and carefully gathered these coins over many years, perhaps one by one, keeping his project a secret, a quiet mission for their future. Martha felt a mix of awe and a little bit of playful annoyance. "Oh, George," she murmured, "you certainly knew how to keep a secret." It was a secret that now, in her hands, felt like a warm, golden hug from her beloved husband. The glittering pile of gold coins sat on the workbench, a secret brought into the light. Martha knew she couldn't just keep them hidden away again. George's note, "For our future, my love," meant they were meant to be used, to provide. But what exactly were they? And how much were they truly worth? She, a simple homemaker, knew nothing about old gold coins. She needed an expert, someone trustworthy. Immediately, a name came to mind: Mr. Henderson. He ran a small, cluttered antique and coin shop just a few blocks from their home. George used to visit Mr. Henderson often, sometimes just to chat about old tools, other times to show him a new find from a yard sale. George always said Mr. Henderson was a fair man, honest and kind, with a deep knowledge of old things. He was the perfect person to ask. Martha carefully gathered the coins, placing them back into the canvas bag. She then put the bag back into the wooden box, securing the rusty latch as best she could. She didn't want to carry them loosely. This felt too important, too precious. The next morning, Martha woke with a sense of purpose. She dressed in her best coat, feeling a mix of nervousness and excitement. After a quick breakfast, she took the heavy wooden box, wrapping it in an old blanket to be less noticeable, and headed out. The walk to Mr. Henderson's shop. Henderson's curiosities felt longer than usual, her heart thumping a steady rhythm against her ribs. When she stepped inside, the familiar scent of old paper and polished wood greeted her. Bells tinkled above the door. Mr. Henderson, a man with kind eyes and spectacles perched on his nose, looked up from behind his counter. "Martha, my dear, it's good to see you. How have you been?" he asked, his voice warm. "Hello, Mr. Henderson," Martha replied, her voice a little shaky. "I'm doing well, thank you. But I have something rather unusual to show you. Something George left behind." She carefully placed the blanket-wrapped box on his counter. Mr. Henderson's eyebrows rose slightly, a look of gentle curiosity on his face. This was it, the moment of truth. Martha carefully unwrapped the old blanket, revealing the dusty wooden box. Mr. Henderson's kind eyes twinkled with interest. "Well now, Martha, what have you got there?" he asked, reaching for his reading glasses. Martha unlatched the box and lifted the lid, revealing the canvas bag nestled inside. It's these," she said, her voice still a little breathless with anticipation as she pulled out the heavy bag and loosened its string. With a soft clink, she poured a handful of the shimmering gold coins onto the velvet mat Mr. Henderson used for examining precious items. Mr. Henderson leaned forward, his face serious. He picked up one of the coins, turning it slowly under the bright lamp on his counter. His fingers, usually steady, seemed to tremble slightly. He then picked up another and another, examining each one closely. Martha watched his face, her heart doing a nervous dance. His eyes, behind the thick lenses of his spectacles, grew wider and wider. A low whistle escaped his lips. "Martha," he said, his voice hushed with awe. "Do you know what these are?" Martha shook her head. "I found them in George's workshop. There was a note that said, 'For our future, my love.' I thought maybe they were just old trinkets, but they feel so important." Mr. Henderson carefully placed the coins back on the mat. "Important is an understatement, my dear," he said, his voice now filled with excitement. "These aren't just old coins. These are genuine gold pieces, and quite rare at that. See this carving?" He pointed to a specific detail on one coin. This marks them as coming from the late 1800s, a very specific historical period. And the condition. George kept them beautifully preserved. He looked up at Martha, his face beaming. "This isn't just a collection, Martha. This is a significant find. These are highly sought after by collectors." He then paused, taking a deep breath. "These coins. They are very, very valuable." Mr. Henderson leaned back, still beaming, then looked at Martha with a serious but joyous expression. "Martha," he began, "George was a clever man. These coins. This collection isn't just valuable, it's a small fortune." Martha blinked. "A fortune? How much are we talking about, Mr. Henderson? Enough to fix the leaky faucet?" she asked, trying to make a joke, but her voice was shaky. She imagined a few $100s, maybe 1,000 at best. That would be a wonderful help. Mr. Henderson chuckled gently. "More than a leaky faucet, Martha. Much, much more. Each of these coins, given its rarity and condition, could be worth thousands. And you have." He looked back at the pile. "Well over 100 of them. Do you understand what that means?" Martha's mind tried to do the math, but the numbers were too big, too unbelievable. Thousands multiplied by 100? Her jaw dropped. "Thousands," she whispered. "Each?" "Yes, Martha," he confirmed, his voice gentle. George carefully put together a very impressive collection. "We're talking about a sum of money that most people only dream of seeing. Enough to live very comfortably, to take care of any worries you might have. It's truly a substantial amount, far more than you could possibly imagine." Martha sat there, stunned into silence. Her vision blurred a little as her eyes welled up with tears. A significant amount of money. A fortune. She had lived a simple, happy life with George, never wanting for much, always careful with their savings. The thought of having so much money, suddenly, unexpectedly, was overwhelming. It wasn't just the money itself, it was the sheer scale of George's secret. He had planned this, meticulously, for so long. For their future, a future he knew he wouldn't fully share. The weight of his love, his quiet devotion, settled over her. This wasn't just about gold. It was about George, always providing, always caring, even in his absence. She wiped a tear from her cheek, a mixture of disbelief and profound gratitude washing over her. The words, "a small fortune," and "thousands each," swirled in Martha's head, making her feel light-headed. She grasped the edge of the counter to steady herself, tears blurring her vision. It wasn't just the shock of the money, though. That was immense. It was the understanding that washed over her, a deep, profound realization about George. Her quiet, unassuming George had been planning this, meticulously, for years. He hadn't just stumbled upon these coins, he had sought them out, learned about them, and carefully kept them safe. All those times he'd come home with old things. He'd been building this treasure, piece by precious piece. The newspaper clippings about rare coin auctions suddenly made perfect sense. He was a secret investor, a quiet collector, all for her. "He always said he wanted to make sure I was taken care of," Martha whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Mr. Henderson nodded, his eyes sympathetic. "George was a good man, Martha. A very good man." A tear traced a path down Martha's wrinkled cheek. This fortune wasn't just gold. It was a tangible testament to George's unwavering love and his thoughtful planning. He had spent his life providing for her, and even in death, he had managed one last, incredible act of care. He knew she would be alone, and he wanted to ensure her comfort, her security, her future. The sadness of missing him was still there, a constant ache. But now it was joined by an overwhelming warmth. George's love felt so real, so present in this glittering pile of coins. It was a secret he had kept, not out of distrust, but out of a desire to surprise her, to protect her, to leave her with peace of mind. Martha felt a strange mix of disbelief, gratitude, and a renewed sense of connection to the man she had loved for so long. She felt as though George was right there beside her, smiling that knowing smile of his. Back home, the gold coins safely stored, Martha sat in her favorite armchair, a cup of fresh tea in her hands, though she barely noticed it. Her mind was far away, drifting through the decades of her life with George. She thought about their humble beginnings, two young people with big dreams, but very little money. They had started their life together in a small apartment, saving every penny, making do with what they had. George had always worked hard. He wasn't a man who sought fame or fortune, but he was fiercely devoted to their family. He often took on extra shifts, worked on weekends, anything to make sure Martha and their children, Sarah and Tom, had what they needed. She remembered him saying, "I just want to make sure my family is always comfortable, Martha, that you never have to worry." and he had done just that through thick and thin. They never had grand vacations or fancy cars, but their life was rich with love, laughter, and simple joys. A picnic in the park, a homemade dinner, quiet evenings reading together. These were their treasures. Martha had always felt secure, knowing George was there, a steady and reliable presence. Now, this incredible discovery added another layer to his legacy. He hadn't just worked hard, he had also planned with extraordinary foresight and patience. To secretly collect these valuable coins, year after year, without a single word to her, all to build a safeguard for her future, was a profound act of love. It showed a depth of caring that moved Martha to her core. She smiled faintly through her tears. George, always the quiet provider. He didn't need grand gestures or public displays. His love was in his steady hands, his thoughtful actions, and now, in this hidden, glittering fortune. He had indeed provided for her in a way she could never have imagined long after he was gone. It was a comforting thought, a warm embrace from the past, assuring her that she was, and always would be, cherished. After a long, quiet afternoon of reflection, Martha knew she couldn't keep this incredible secret to herself. George had intended it for our future, and that future included their children, Sarah and Tom. They deserved to know about their father's extraordinary act of love and foresight. Taking a deep breath, Martha picked up the phone and dialed Sarah's number first. "Hello, Mom. Everything all right?" Sarah's cheerful voice came through the line. "Oh, Sarah, yes, everything is. Well, it's more than all right. I have something truly unbelievable to tell you," Martha began, trying to keep her voice steady. She then recounted the entire story, from finding the dusty box in George's workshop to Mr. Henderson's stunned appraisal of the gold coins. There was a moment of silence on Sarah's end, then a gasp. "Mom, are you serious? Gold coins? A fortune? Dad did this?" Her voice was filled with a mix of shock and wonder. "I can't believe it. He never said a word." "I know, dear. He truly was full of surprises," Martha replied, a soft smile on her face. "I want you and Tom to come over this weekend. I want to show you." Next, Martha called Tom. His reaction was similar, starting with disbelief and then erupting into joyous excitement. "Dad, a secret millionaire. Who would have thought? Always so quiet, so humble. This is incredible, Mom," Tom exclaimed, clearly overjoyed for her. Both children, after getting over their initial shock, were not just happy about the money, but deeply touched by their father's hidden gesture. They understood, just as Martha did, that this was more than just wealth. It was a profound testament to George's enduring love and his lifelong commitment to their family. They promised to come as soon as they could, eager to see the treasure and hear more about their amazing dad. Martha hung up the phone, a warmth spreading through her chest. Sharing the news already made the fortune feel more real, more purposeful. The following Saturday, Sarah and Tom arrived, their faces alight with curiosity and excitement. They hugged Martha tightly, both eager to hear the full story and see the unbelievable treasure. Martha had set the wooden box on the kitchen table, feeling it was the most fitting place for such a family revelation. "All right, sit down, both of you," Martha said, a twinkle in her eye. "Now, I'll tell you everything, just as it happened." She began her tale, starting with her decision to finally clean out George's workshop, the dusty shelves, and the unexpected discovery of the unmarked box. She described her struggle to open it, the layers of old newspaper clippings, and finally, the heavy cloth bag. As she reached the part about pouring out the gold coins, Sarah gasped again, and Tom leaned forward, his eyes wide. Martha then pulled out the canvas bag and, with a flourish, emptied its contents onto the table. The dozens of gold coins tumbled out, catching the kitchen light, creating a dazzling display. "Oh, Mom, they're beautiful," Sarah exclaimed, picking up a coin with careful fingers. Tom, equally mesmerized, scooped a handful into his palm, feeling their surprising weight. Martha then shared George's note, carefully unfolding the tiny paper for them to read. "For our future, my love." A hush fell over the kitchen. Both Sarah and Tom looked at the note, then at the coins, and then at their mother, their eyes filled with emotion. "Dad, he did this for us." Tom's voice was soft, almost reverent. "For all of us, dear," Martha confirmed, her voice thick. "Mr. Henderson says they're very old, very rare, and worth a significant fortune." The children were truly amazed. They had always known their father was a good man, a hard-working man. But this level of secret planning and provision was beyond anything they had imagined. They talked for hours, recalling George's quiet ways, his love for old things, and how he had always put his family first. The gold coins weren't just money. They were a profound symbol of their father's enduring love, a secret legacy that would change their lives. With the shimmering gold coins spread out on the table, a hushed excitement filled the kitchen. After the initial awe and tears, the conversation naturally turned to what to do with such an unexpected fortune. Sarah, always practical, suggested investing some of it wisely. Tom, ever the dreamer, mused about how much good it could do. Martha listened to her children, a gentle smile on her face. She knew George's heart, and she knew what he would have wanted. "This was for our future, and for that, I want to make sure I am comfortable," she stated, her voice calm and clear. "I don't need a mansion or a fancy car, but there are things I've worried about, and now I don't have to." She looked at Sarah and Tom. "First, I want to pay off the house. That mortgage has been a weight for years, and your father always wanted it gone." Her children nodded in agreement, knowing how much peace that would bring their mother. "And then," Martha continued, "I want to make sure you two and your families are helped. George loved his grandchildren more than anything. I want to set aside money for their education to give them a head start." Sarah reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "Mom, you don't have to do that. This is your money, Dad's gift to you." "It's his gift to all of us, in a way," Martha replied. "He always wanted to provide, and this is his final way of doing so. It warms my heart to think of it helping his grandchildren achieve their dreams." Tom added, "What about you, Mom? Is there anything you've always wanted to do or something for yourself?" Martha paused, looking at the glittering coins. "Perhaps a little trip," she mused, a faraway look in her eyes. "Something George and I always talked about, but never quite got around to. A quiet adventure." The decision felt right. A perfect blend of practical security, family support, and a touch of personal joy. George's fortune would not be wasted. It would be used to build a brighter, more secure future for the family he loved so dearly. The days that followed were busy, but with a lightness Martha hadn't felt in a long time. With Mr. Henderson's help, a portion of the gold coin collection was carefully and wisely sold. The amount was indeed staggering, more money than Martha had ever held in her hands. Her first priority was the house. That evening, after talking with a financial advisor Mr. Henderson recommended, Martha sat down and wrote a check. A large, beautiful check that completely paid off the mortgage. The paper felt heavy in her hand, a symbol of freedom and peace. For years, the monthly payment had been a quiet worry, a shadow in the back of her mind, especially after George passed. Now, it was gone. The house, their beloved home, was truly hers, free and clear. A deep sigh of relief escaped her lips, and she felt George smiling down on her. With the biggest worry lifted, Martha turned her attention to the house itself. It was an old house, full of character, but it had a few quirks that George had always meant to fix. The leaky faucet, a running joke between them, was finally replaced. The drafty window in the living room got new ceiling. The old porch swing, which had a wobbly leg, was repaired and repainted a cheerful blue, just like the workshop door. She hired a kind handyman, a younger man George would have liked, to help with the bigger jobs. The kitchen, which had looked a bit tired, got a fresh coat of paint and some new, brighter lights. She didn't want a complete overhaul, just improvements that would make her life easier and the home more comfortable and inviting. Each repair, each fresh coat of paint, felt like an act of care, not just for the house, but for herself. It was George's love, transformed into tangible improvements, making her home a haven of security and newfound joy. The quiet worry was replaced by a quiet contentment, a sense of well-being that George had so clearly wished for her. With her mortgage paid and the house feeling brighter and more secure, Martha turned her thoughts to her grandchildren. George had adored them, always telling them stories, building them little wooden toys in his workshop, and cheering them on at their school plays. He had always believed in the power of a good education. He would have loved this, Martha murmured to herself, thinking of George. She remembered how he would save up small amounts of money in a special jar labeled Grandkids' Futures, even though it rarely amounted to much. Now, with this incredible fortune, she could make his quiet dream a reality. She met again with the financial advisor, explaining her wish to set up something for her grandchildren. "I want to make sure they have a good start," she said, "for college or whatever path they choose, so they don't have to worry about the money part as much." The advisor helped her set up a small educational trust for each of her grandchildren. It wasn't an extravagant amount that would spoil them, but it was enough to make a significant difference, to ease the burden of future costs for their parents, Sarah and Tom. When Martha told her children about the trusts, they were deeply moved. "Mom, that's so thoughtful," Sarah said, her eyes glistening. "Dad would be so proud of you. He always wanted the best for them." Tom nodded, a lump in his throat. "It's truly a gift, Mom, from both of you." Martha felt a profound sense of satisfaction. This act, more than anything, felt like a direct extension of George's love. It was a tangible way to pass on his generosity and his belief in their family's future. The gold coins, once a hidden secret, were now becoming a legacy of opportunity and care, ensuring that George's quiet provision would continue to bless the generations to come. It filled her heart with a gentle, joyful warmth, knowing that George's love was still at work. With her home secure and her grandchildren's futures brightened, Martha felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. There was one more thing, a personal wish she and George had shared for a very long time. It was a trip, a quiet adventure they had always dreamed of taking, but never quite found the time or extra money for. "Remember that time, George?" she'd often say, looking at old photographs. "When we said we'd go back to the Rocky Mountains." In their youth, George and Martha had spent a magical summer camping and hiking in a national park nestled in the Rocky Mountains. The towering peaks, the crisp air, the scent of pine, and the clear blue lakes had captured their hearts. They had promised each other they would return someday, perhaps for their 50th anniversary. But life had a way of getting busy, and the trip remained a cherished dream. Now, with George's incredible gift, that dream could finally come true. Martha decided to use a portion of the fortune for this special journey. She wouldn't be alone. Sarah, eager to spend quality time with her mother, offered to accompany her. They booked a small, cozy cabin near the park, just like George would have preferred over a fancy hotel. Martha packed her sturdy walking shoes and a sketchbook, just as she had done all those years ago. As they drove through the winding mountain roads, Martha felt a mix of joy and a gentle ache in her heart. Every turn, every view, brought back a flood of memories of George. She could almost hear his low chuckle as they spotted a deer, or his excited voice pointing out a particularly beautiful waterfall. This trip wasn't just for her. It was for them, a journey she was taking for both of them, a way to honor their shared past and their enduring love. It was the adventure George had always wanted for them, a beautiful way to spend his future, my love. The surprising discovery of George's hidden fortune did more than just change Martha's financial situation. It brought her family closer in a way she hadn't expected. Before, George was simply Dad or Grandpa, remembered with fondness and a touch of sadness. Now he was also George, the secret treasure collector, a man of unexpected depths and clever plans. Family gatherings, which had sometimes grown quiet with the weight of his absence, now buzzed with lively stories and laughter. Sarah and Tom often brought up their father's secret life, marveling at his patience and foresight. "Can you believe Dad kept that quiet for so long?" Tom would say, shaking his head with a grin. Always so calm, and all this time he was building a fortune. They talked about the small details of his life that now made sense. His quiet trips to antique shops, the hours spent in his workshop, the old newspaper clippings Martha found in the box. Each memory, once seemingly ordinary, was now viewed through the lens of his clever, loving surprise. The children and grandchildren learned new things about George, seeing him not just as the steady, reliable man they knew, but as an adventurer, a planner, and a man who loved his family so deeply that he prepared for their future in the most extraordinary way. Martha found immense comfort in these conversations. It kept George's memory vibrant, not just for her, but for everyone. It was as if his presence was still very much alive in their family, woven into the fabric of their daily lives through this incredible story. The gold coins, once a source of confusion, became a golden thread connecting them all, a shared secret that spoke volumes about the man they loved. The fortune was a gift, but the renewed connection and the celebration of George's unique spirit were even more precious. As the seasons turned, Martha found a profound shift within herself. The initial shock of the fortune had settled into a deep, abiding peace. Her days were no longer shadowed by the quiet ache of loneliness or the small worries about money. Instead, she felt a renewed sense of security and joy. This change wasn't just about the money, though. That certainly helped. It was about the incredible understanding that had come with the discovery. George, her steadfast George, had truly looked out for her, even from beyond. His secret treasure was more than gold. It was a final, powerful testament to his love and his constant desire to provide. Every morning, as she sipped her tea by the kitchen window, Martha would think of him. She no longer felt the sharp pang of loss as much as a gentle warmth a feeling of his presence. It was as if he had left her a golden hug, a promise that she would be all right. The weight of financial worries had been lifted, replaced by a deep gratitude for his foresight. She would sometimes visit his workshop, now tidy and organized, and smile at the spot where the dusty box had been hidden. It wasn't a place of sadness anymore, but a place of quiet wonder and a powerful reminder of his enduring care. Knowing he had planned for her future, meticulously collecting those coins for years, filled her with a comfort that no amount of money alone could buy. Martha felt truly blessed. Her heart was full, not just with the memories of their life together, but with the active, ongoing feeling of George's love still watching over her. It was a beautiful, unexpected continuation of their 50 years together, a golden thread stretching from his past planning to her present peace. She knew she was not truly alone, for George, in his own special way, was still by her side. The small, dusty wooden box that Martha had found on a high shelf in George's workshop now sat on her bedside table. It was no longer filled with gold coins, those having found their new purpose, but it held George's tiny, handwritten note. "For our future, my love." What was once a forgotten item, a plain, unassuming container hidden away, had been completely transformed. It was no longer just a box. It had become a powerful symbol. For Martha, it represented George's enduring love, his quiet strength, and his incredible foresight. It was a tangible piece of him, a vessel that had held not just a fortune, but a profound secret of devotion. She often picked it up, feeling its smooth, heavy wood. It brought her a quiet joy, a gentle comfort. The box reminded her that even in his quiet ways, George had always been thinking of her, planning for her well-being. It was a physical reminder that his love hadn't ended with his passing, but continued to actively shape her life. When her grandchildren visited, they would sometimes ask about Grandpa George's treasure box. Martha would open it, showing them the empty interior, and then, with a loving smile, the small note. She would tell them the story again, of the dusty workshop, the hidden box, and the glittering coins, always emphasizing their grandfather's cleverness and his deep, unwavering love for their family. The box became a cherished heirloom, not for its monetary value, but for the story it held. It was a story of love, of surprises, and of the quiet strength of a man who left a legacy far richer than gold. For Martha, it was a constant source of unexpected joy, a daily reminder that even after a year of sorrow, life could still hold wonderful, loving surprises. It was George's final, beautiful gift, ensuring her peace and reminding her of their unbreakable bond. Years passed, and Martha continued to live her life with a quiet contentment, a happiness deepened by the incredible discovery in George's workshop. The house remained comfortable, the grandchildren thrived, and the memories of her beloved husband were always a source of warmth, not sorrow. She often thought about that dusty wooden box, tucked away on a high shelf, holding its amazing secret. It was a constant, gentle reminder of George's cleverness, his patience, and his boundless love. The fortune had not changed her into a different person. She remained the kind, practical Martha everyone knew. But it had brought her a profound sense of security and freedom, lifting the small worries that often accompany old age. She cherished the family gatherings, where George's story of the hidden gold coins was told and retold, each time bringing smiles and a fresh wave of appreciation for the man he was. It was a living legacy, a part of their family's history, always beginning with, elderly Mom found a dusty box in her late husband's workshop. Martha would sometimes sit in the sunroom, Looking out at the garden George had so carefully tended, the world felt a little brighter, a little more secure, knowing that his love had extended far beyond his lifetime. She lived out her days comfortably, surrounded by the love of her family, always remembering the incredible, unexpected fortune that had brought so much peace and joy into her life. It was George's final, most beautiful way of saying, "I'll always take care of you, my love." And he truly had.